evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kutan.
Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider the news of the day. Now, and the news of the day undoubtedly has been the resignation of Dr. Mazli Malik as Education Minister. His resignation took effect today after helming the post for nearly 1 year and 9 months. Now, in making sense of the noise surrounding this story, let's break down some of the key elements. Let's begin with why he resigned. Has that been sufficiently explained, Sharaad?
Well, Melissa, I think, when we look at some of the discussions around Mazli Malik's resignation, what is clear is that he was seen as a liability, a political liability for the coalition because of the kind of controversies he seemed to have precipitated in some of the initiatives he put together. Now, whether that was fair, that objectively speaking, these were bad moves or bad policies, I think is a matter for deeper discussion. But what's clear is that when it came to the kind of controversies generated for the Pakatan government, still not yet 2 years, in that role, he clearly is one of those names that comes to the fore. So
well, one of those names, Sharaad, but definitely not the only name. I mean, it would be completely unfair to blame Mazli alone for underperformance, given that there were many others at his level, many other ministers whose performances were not up to mark either. Now, I think the question to be asked here is whether Mazli was the fall guy for the mistakes as a whole, of the government as a whole, whether he was the fall guy.
Yeah, so there are two aspects to this. One is whether it was underperformance that was generating the controversies, or rather, it was the kind of moves that he made, either read as misplaced priorities or read as a kind of cultural politics that some segments of the country were not happy with. And I say this, advisedly. I mean, Malaysia is made up of different communities, different publics, not all racial in nature, more ideological values and so on and so forth, that have been, I think, weighing in on the question of where they want the country to go. And they don't always agree. So something like controversy isn't about underperformance. It's really about the value systems that we have.
Well, I think one of the threads we should pick at in the conversation around Mazli Malik's resignation is also, looking back at why he was chosen in the first place, understanding Tun Dr. Mahathir's considerations or thought process when it came to picking a Minister of Education. And I think it's important. I want to kind of point to Wong Sai-wan in The Star, who wrote an op-ed, and he said that while previous education ministers were seasoned politicians or senior university vice-chancellors, the reality is that Mazli Malik was merely a low-ranked lecturer without even the administrative experience of heading a department or a faculty.
Right.
These are the words of Dr. Wong Sai-wan.
Well, actually, not Wong Sai-wan, Wong Chun-wai.
Oh, sorry, excuse me.
Wong Chun-wai. So that we'll need to correct that quote there. But the important thing is what Wong Chun-wai of The Star it points to is this idea that, and it's a problematic one, who is really qualified to be the Minister of Education? Yes. Melissa, it was said by a very young activist, some a year or so ago, everybody believes they can be the Minister of Education, do a much better job than the Education Minister. And I think that's true. I mean, because education is very close to the hearts of many Malaysians, everybody thinks it's common sense that is required to do the job. And more importantly, is people don't recognize how complex the education system is.
Yes.
And I think this is one of the things that isn't understood. The complexity and much of Mazli Malik's work was in those areas that the public doesn't actually see. So they see the big ticket items, Khat and Jawi issue. They look at the black shoe issue or the swimming pool issue, but they don't know perhaps some of the issues around the food program for the kids, or the question of teachers and their administrative loads, or stopping exams for the first 3 years of education, introducing play or love, as you like to put it, back into the education system. All these things really aren't things that most of the public focuses on when they think about the education system. So,
well, what is it that the public focuses on? And I think that, broad policy in improving the education system, schools, and how it feeds into universities, that is what the public is looking for. And I have to say that what that's what's needed, and it's been sorely lacking during the tenure of Dr. Mazli Malik.
Well, okay, let's go back to the Wong Chun-wai quote again.
Thank you for correcting
Yeah, no
me.
worries. You know, what I think Wong Chun-wai was looking at, and I don't know if he's correct in this, is it somebody with administrative experience that is necessary, or is it somebody with a sense of how to reform what the Prime Minister called, and his cabinet, I guess, would endorse, as the broken nature of our education system?
Right.
Somebody needed to change. The question was, Mahathir, remember, put himself up
Correct.
for that role first before he, he stepped away from it and then put Mazli Malik there. Was he the wrong choice? Wong Chun-wai seemed to think that, he should have put a man that was more directed towards issues of, the Industrial Revolution 4.0, and that rhetoric, rather than somebody who was much more cultural in his approach and philosophical in his approach to education.
If that was, in fact, the intention of Dr. Mahathir, saying that, he knows the country needs engineers, needs digital skills to keep up, to future-proof the young for future jobs, then why was it that Mahathir put a man who was, who had a penchant for culture, had a penchant for religion, into the post of the education minister? Why pick this man for the job in the first place? And I think that's a question we need to consider. But also, what should be the considerations of picking an education minister? That's one that many people have started to weigh in on. In fact, if we ask PAS's Kuala Terengganu MP, Ahmad Amzad Hashim, the next education must be a Malay Muslim.
So the education minister's identity for PAS. Look, PAS has its own take on governance in a Muslim majority country. It believes that, key leadership roles have to be held by Muslims. And that's a very limited and identity-based approach to the question of governance, because beyond the question of, let's say it's assumed every candidate is Malay Muslim, then what? What else would go into the mix to make sure? You remember, PAS is driven by its own theocratic ideas around, the Muslim Ummah and all these kinds of things. So put that aside. For us who don't necessarily subscribe to that vision, what is really the next step? What exactly is the Prime Minister going to do? Because this is a closed-door kind of process, right?
Yeah, it's not like we get to vote. It's not like we get to vote who the next education minister will be.
Yeah, and I wonder to what extent this is going to be a collective decision, right? Whether the Cabinet's going to sit down and think, okay, if this was a major fail for them, how are they going to rectify it? Because it's not just simply choosing a successor. It's going to be somebody who's going to prove that this government knows what it's doing. And I think that is the larger challenge for the Pakatan Harapan cabinet, to show that it's really got its act together.
Well, I have to also remind everyone that, the post of education minister is a highly politicized one that is so much more compared to other ministerial positions, right? But if you take a look at in the past, the education minister's post was regarded as a stepping stone to, a higher position, bigger positions, in fact, even a prime ministership. So you saw that Tun Abdul Razak, Tun Hussein On, Abdullah Badawi, Anwar Ibrahim, Najib Razak, Hishamuddin Hussain, they've all had this position before. So again, all eyes on who could be the next Minister of Education.
Yeah, so the problem has been with that approach and that political culture that the Barisan National bred over 5 decades, is that it's made the post extraordinarily political, right? And the politicization of our education system and the constraints that come with it on what are politicians going to do in that position. Will they take bold measures, or will they be conservative? Will they pander to interest groups, or will they think about the long-term interests of the nation as a whole? These are the things that can come up when you think about the politicization of the post. Now, moving forward, are we going to get non-political leadership in the education ministry, or are we going to get more of the same?
Well, okay, sources from within Bersatu have hinted at Datuk Sri Mustafa Muhammad, or Tok Pa as he's affectionately known, as the party's favourite among possible candidates to fill the post. I think the same source who had spoken to the media also said that Datuk Marzuki Yahya, currently Deputy Foreign Minister and Bersatu Secretary General, could be considered as Mazli's replacement. But looking at an online poll by the Malaysian Insight, they found that more than half of the 1,500 respondents had picked Nurul Izzah Anwar ahead of Tok Ba. So all interesting choices, Sharaad.
Yeah, so I guess it's not going to be a popularity contest, or will it be? I think is the question we'll need to ask the leadership when it does in fact announce who is going to be the successor to Mazli Malik. But more importantly, are the choices constrained by party political realities? Does this have to be a Bersatu representative? Does it have to be somebody who's now a parliamentarian? Can it be, somebody brought through Senate? Remember, Daim Zainuddin was a senator brought into cabinet. All kinds of options. The question is, will this cabinet, Dr. Mahathir's cabinet, in fact choose a technocrat, somebody non-political, to do this job?
That's interesting. And I wonder whether we can look to our neighbour Indonesia when we are considering a choice of Minister of Education. I mean, Indonesia, President Jokowi just recently picked Nadiem Makarim from Dago, who 35 years old, Harvard educated, absolutely no background in academia, but one that is a digital entrepreneur in this new age. I think it could be an interesting one to keep tabs on.
Yeah, but it's also true that you could be a very successful digital entrepreneur, not necessarily a very successful politician, because remember, with your CEO, you're basically the dictator. Now, if you're a politician, you're going to have to include all kinds of stakeholders. You're going to have to be consultative. Will that person be able to do that, coming with that corporate background? I'm not sure. It's a tough choice.
All right, we're going to continue our focus on the Ministry of Education after this, so stay tuned to consider this. Hello, welcome back to Consider This. Melisa and Sharaad here with you. Now, the Malaysian academic movement, or better known as GERAK, has added its voice to the discussion about the resignation of Dr. Mazli Malik as Education Minister. In a statement released today, GERAK has called for continuity of some of the programs that have been put in place under Mazli's tenure, but also it has acknowledged the many challenges that come with this post. Now, we have joining us on the line Professor Zarum Naim, chairperson of GERAK. Zarum, thank you for joining us today. Now, objectively, what did you think of his performance as Education Minister?
Hello, hi.
Hi, can you hear us, Zarum?
Not that well.
Okay, well, I'll repeat my question to you. Now, what did you think of Mazli Malik's performance as Education Minister, in hindsight?
For higher education, I think he did try, and he was in the process of working out numerous strategies for the future of higher education in Malaysia, and working out reforms together with the help of others, including GERAK.
What do you think led to the kind of trouble that Mazli got into? I mean, do you think that he deserved the kind of endless mockery and, kind of browbeating almost from very moody public over the last year and a half?
I don't think he deserved it. I don't think anybody deserves that kind of mockery, especially mockery from people who do not know what's actually going down on the ground, as it were, but were basing their comments of mockery on news reports largely. Yeah, selective news accounts, selective accounts of what he was doing at that point in time. I think that's not right.
All right, Zarum, then whose responsibility is that you say that the public does not know what's going down on the ground? Now, the onus is on the ministry or the media? Who then is responsible for communicating what's happening on the ground?
Well, I think the onus is on both sides, yeah. Mazli and, in fact, the whole Pakatan Harapan government, I would say, has got a lousy communication strategy. They don't have the people to put across their ideas very well, evidently. So for that, they have to look into that. I mean, communications is important. and communicating policies is important. You just can't enact policies without communicating with the people. And I think for the past 18 months to 20 months, that has been the case for a lot of things. And I think there's no, as far as the PH government is concerned, that there shouldn't be an excuse for that, because they have the machinery. So it's essentially enabling that machinery, enabling the people handling the machinery. If they can't do that, then they've got to go back to school. They might want to do some of our degrees that we provide, you know.
Right, Zarum, let's talk about some of the concrete achievements, especially in policy terms or structural terms, that you would like to see, you and Garat would like to see continue with the new appointment.
Policy. Well, we outlined 10 proposals right at the beginning of this regime's ascent to power. We outlined 10 proposals. We shared it with Mazli. We shared it with the media, and evidently people were quite excited about them. People in the media, other politicians were excited about them. And even Dr. Mazli was excited about them. But we were very well aware, and we still are very well aware, that there are problems with this kind of thing. Yeah? That essentially the realities are such that some of these things will require political will, will require hard-fought battles. Yeah, some have been achieved, others have not. Yeah, it's because of internal problems, it's because of structural problems.
Okay, well, bearing in mind those realities, those political realities, Zarum, Garat has proposed 2 names to be considered as Mazli's replacement. The first that you propose is the economist Jomo Kwame Sundram, and the second is the former UKM Vice-Chancellor Mohammad Shah Mohammad Sani. Why have you proposed these 2 names, and do you think that they will be supported, given that the appointment requires political will?
We suggested them because in our initial proposal as well, the 10 proposals that we provided for the ministry, we had proposed that leadership and leadership at the very top has to be in the hands of capable people, intellectuals, not just bureaucrats, right? And these 2, I'm sure there are others as well, but we decided to just focus on these 2. Jomo and Shamsani are recognized, respected intellectuals, and so we thought we'd propose their names. Yeah.
Zarum, one of the issues, of course, that Garat has brought up is just the unwieldy nature of the ministry and its remit, right? You suggest that, in fact, it should be broken up, or we should return to the older model of breaking up the ministry into 2 parts, higher education and then the kind of primary and basic education. Could you explain it very quickly why you think that is still a relevant way of operating? Well,
the situation has changed so much. Education strategies, education policies, the very concept of education has changed so much, and that you require essentially the breaking down from schools, the breaking down between schools and higher education. It's one way of essentially decentralizing control. It's another way of decentralizing the actual practice of education and education policies. And I think the less unwieldy it is, and by breaking the education department into 2, the easier it would be to handle these 2 different areas. I mean, if you look at what has happened over the past 20 months, the fact that Mazli was running here to do the schools, then he's running there to do higher education. And we saw the hard work that was required by a single minister, and I think this is and education is a crucial, essentially crucial ministry. We saw the hard work that was necessary, the long hours that was spent, and I think that requires a splitting up of the 2, with different priorities, where the schools will invariably lead into either universities or polytechnics and so on and so forth. But you just can't have them. Sorry.
Right. Zaram, so, in the last minute that we have, what do you think, or what would you like to see as kind of a central value with this new minister coming on board? Is it a consultative approach, as the Dongjong has put out in its statement? What they would like to see more consultation coming from the minister, the new minister, and so on and so forth. What do you think is important?
I agree with Dongjong. I mean, you need to consult with the different stakeholders. Ministers need to consult with the different stakeholders. This is supposed to be the new Malaysia, and consultation is central to all of this, or else we're going to get numerous problems like we've had over the past 20 years, not only in education, but with other areas as well, with ICET and so on and so forth, where without that consultation, these top-down decisions don't work anymore, I feel. Yeah, there is definitely a need for consultation. There is a need to deal with different stakeholders. There is a need to essentially impress on different stakeholders the different sort of positive things that they can get from what is essentially being prepared for the rakyat, as it were.
Thank you so much for speaking with us, Zarum, and sharing your thoughts. We're going to be right back with more on Consider This, so make sure you stay tuned. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa with me, Sharaad. Now, here's what we want you to consider tonight. Since his resignation yesterday, a petition seeking Dr. Mazli Malik's return as Minister of Education has gained some 360,000 signatories since it was launched at change.org yesterday evening. So the question is, should we be listening to these 360,000 signatories?
The signatories, the truth of the matter is, Melissa, is that, Mazli was probably the first target of this petition, this new petition culture. I think there was a petition in the late 2018, just a couple of months into his position, calling for him to be removed. So at that point, should the government have listened to whoever's out there? Or now should they listen to them? I think you can't run the country on the basis of a kind of eternal plebiscite. What is important, I think, in this day and age is that the government explain why it's done what it's done, right? And I think that is something that we're not really developing as a culture. So the choices of who becomes the next minister will probably be shrouded in mystery.
Sure.
And if they are removed, that too will be shrouded in reasonable mystery, I think.
I have to say, so we have no say in who gets chosen as ministers, but what I think this petition represents or reflects is, participatory democracy. Yeah. One of the ways I think it just reflects the fact that people want to have a say. Education is too big not to be consultative, right? So the idea is perhaps the government should be listening, and this is a way for people to feel like they can participate and be heard.
Okay, so I get everybody feels they want to participate, and I think feeling is driving and sentiment is driving a lot of these kind of online campaigns. There's a call that's already received, I don't know, over 150,000 signatures calling for the dismantling of the Chinese school system, which is an extraordinary call considering how successful the Chinese school system is. Not only is it more diverse than the national school system, and in producing quality education. So should those 200,000 people be, and their desires be what drives the government's agenda? I don't think so.
Not drive the agenda. I disagree with you then, but I still think that governments should listen. I mean, that's a lot of people, even though it may not be in line with, with the rest of the country, but it's a significant portion, enough to just, I think, pay attention. And I like the American system. I mean, the White House under the Obama administration had this rule. It's called We the People, and it's the petitioning system, where a petition, if it reaches 150 signatories within 30 days, it has to be able to be searchable on the White House website. if it hits 100,000 signatures within 30 days, it then has to receive an official response from the White House, which I think is important. 100,000, clearly that's not that much, right?
I mean, I think there's other real issues in this country when it comes to education. I mean, have we looked at the policy devolution? We have already some forms of autonomy with the different school systems. So the Chinese school system have a reasonable amount of autonomy, the Tamil school systems, and then because we have the madrasas and all that. So, you know, and is that a good thing? Should we in fact look at increasing devolution, giving more choice to the public in terms of schools and government stepping back rather than force-fitting, you know, this kind of cookie-cutter approach to education policy, making it, you know, enforcing, say, English, where, say, Sarawak wants to bring back English, Johor, at least the monarch there wants to see English given a boost there. I mean, would that work within the Federation? In fact, more devolution rather than a kind of national strategy that force-fits everybody into their own mold?
Well, I really think that my takeaway has been tonight, in considering all the conversations around the resignation of Mazli Malik, has really been this ministry is just too big to fail. It's one of the things that we really have to look at really closely, and we all have a stake in this. We all have a vested interest in this. You know, thinking about a more consultative approach, thinking about perhaps the splitting of these two ministries. I'm not one for increasing bureaucracy in any shape or form, but I think that you have to when it's necessary. So perhaps all these things we can consider tonight, right? Okay, that's all the time we have on the show for this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, with me Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for tonight. We'll be back on Monday with you 10 p.m. We'll catch you then. Thank you for watching and good night.